Okay, so we got a 194T by Stihl top handle there. Seen a lot of videos online, people talking about timing advances and muffler mods and quarter pitch conversions. We're going to do all that. See a little bit online talking about porting them, mainly running ported saws, so not actually talking about the porting of these saws. So I just got the stock numbers here, pulled them apart. So 194T stock squish, we got 27 thousandths of an inch. Exhaust opens at 118, closes 244, duration 126. Intake opens 71, closes 72, 143 duration. Stratos, which if you're not familiar with Strato saws, a lot of modern saws have them. Been around a while, but I'll explain them in a moment. The Strato open and close at 66. That's a 132 duration. Upper transfer is open at 133. Gives us a blowdown of 15 degrees, crankcase compression of 61 degrees. Now, the blowdown, short blowdown in Strato saws, that's pretty common. I don't fully know why that is, but I just see that a lot in a lot of like X-Torque, Husqvarna stuff. And then the 61 degrees of crankcase compression. It's a lot of compression for such a little saw. Granted, it is a pretty skinny bore, long stroke saw, but even still, that's quite a bit for a little saw. And I think I figured out why. It has to do with the Stratos. Now, if you're not familiar with the Stratos, these guys right here. So they'll open after, on this saw, they open after the intake, which is this oval right in the middle. And basically what they're doing, they rely on the windows on the piston here, these little windows. If you see the shape of these windows, they're kind of tilted up, right? So the Stratos, they pull fresh air in right here, and they just hold it. It keeps it separate from the lower crankcase. If you have a look inside a cylinder, get some lighting here. So you have a look, I don't know if you can see that, but right there, it's your Strato. Right here is your upper transfers going into your crankcase. So yeah, all that's doing, I was kind of scratching my head, but I finally figured it out. Let me pause this quick. Okay, so Kenny, the guitar fanatic on YouTube, he's got some good information on Stratos, how they work and how to port them. He did some interesting stuff there. He just plugged those windows on the piston right up. So basically shut off the Strato on a 391 Stihl and runs super lean, but then, carries itself in the high torque situations where it needs higher torque and bigger wood. So yeah, I'm going to do something kind of similar to this, not quite so extreme, but just to show you here. So I already took a little bit off the skirt of that piston there to open that intake a little sooner, and took it out of the crankcase compression because I got these numbers here. I dropped it to 57 degrees, transferred that over into my intake opening timing. So went from 143 and all to 152. So it took like 4.5 degrees off of the skirt of the piston. So anyways, back to the Stratos. So you can see here, crankcase compression, number one, used in transfer velocity, forcing that charge up through the transfers into your combustion chamber. Conversely, and that's on the downstroke. On the upstroke, conversely, when it's sucking air in, it converts into negative vacuum pressure, which as soon as that intake cracks, right here, everything's closed off, it's building negative pressure, and as soon as that, show you, there we go. As soon as that cracks, negative pressure gets released in the form of pulling fuel and air from your carburetor. So this is where we get our fresh charge. And this here is just an emissions thing that they started doing a lot more of. I see a lot of it in the modern saws, so it's worth taking the time to understand them. And so we can improve our saws and overcome some of these emissions regulations, which manufacturers are kind of hampered by, not kicking them. Their hands are tied with emissions regulations, so they got to choke up the saw. They'd rather choke up the saw and have a saw that they can put to market rather than not have a saw at all. So that's their take. My take is, if you're going to be running saws professionally, which I do for a living, you want ones that will last. And so it's worth taking the time, to me, to do this kind of thing and improve performance. So anyhow, ramble. So a little bit after. Now, I just showed you these windows that go into the transfers, into the crankcase. So that negative pressure that's building in the crankcase, which is why it's got such a high crankcase compression, in my opinion, 61 degrees for a small saw. It needs that extra vacuum pressure to both suck fuel and air into the lower crankcase and suck fresh air into the upper transfers. The reason they do that is so that it's a form of scavenging. Scavenging just refers to different methods in an engine to clear the combustion chamber of all these spent exhaust fumes. In this case, sometimes what happens with the two-stroke, a lot of times they'll do it with fresh charge. They evacuate, scavenge the cylinder with fresh charge, and then that, ideally, if it's tuned correctly, that fresh charge goes out, pushes it out, and then actually gets sucked back in. And then, in a perfect world, that the molecular line between the spent exhaust and the fuel, the fresh fuel, gets cut by the exhaust port. I think the exhaust port's over here. So anyways, that's the ideal. Obviously, not a perfect world, so that's not what happens. What ends up happening is you get fresh fuel coming out of the exhaust port into the exhaust, into the atmosphere. Emissions regulations say, no, don't do that. So if we're gonna have that kind of thing happen, it's unavoidable. We'd rather it be fresh air than unburnt fuel. That's their impetus. My impetus is when you do that, you end up running quite a bit leaner and running higher, less fuel concentration in the combustion chamber. We know that in a two-stroke, your fuel is mixed with oil and it lubricates your engine. So when you get less lubrication, you get more heat. When you get more heat, you have a lower life expectancy for your saw, coupled with the fact that emissions regulations as they are, they like to choke up mufflers a lot. So if you get a modern saw, best thing you can do to it, easiest thing you can do to it, muffler modification right away. Any Husqvarna X-Torque, any of these new like Stihl M-Tronic stuff, you got to do that and then do a hard reset with the M-Tronics. This one is not an M-Tronic. It is still, you can pull the carburetor information from the little chip or whatever it's got, but it's not an M-Tronic carburetor. It's a manually tuned carburetor. So yeah, anyways, that's enough. That kind of explains what I was doing there. Now, I'm not done on this saw. I've already, my idea here with taking that a little bit off the skirt was so that, well, the idea is if this cracks a little bit sooner, you'll get more of that pressure sending fuel and air mixture into the crankcase as opposed to into the Stratos. That was my idea. Now, the flip side of that is there's only 360 degrees of rotation in a crankshaft, in a circle. You can't just pull, if you're pulling degrees somewhere, if you're adding degrees, you're taking them from somewhere else. So in this case, I'm adding degrees to my intake, but I'm taking it away from my crankcase. So I was kind of thinking about this 3 a.m., thoughts start flowing and thinking, man, where's the line of diminishing return between opening this sooner and losing crankcase volume and thusly losing transfer velocity and vacuum pressure to suck air and fuel in here? Where's the line of diminishing return there? I don't really know. I'm not a mathematician. I wrote some numbers down to kind of try to explain this idea. So here are the numbers that I've got. I'll show you. I'm not done. These are my ported numbers so far. I'm not done because I'm going to work on the Stratos more. But this is what I've done to it. So same on the exhaust. 152 as opposed to 132 on the intake duration. Same. And then, but yeah, as you can see, 4 degrees added here from 72-ish, 4.5 degrees more like, because it's a 9-degree difference. 4.5 degrees, lost it in the crankcase compression from 61 to 57. So that's the difference there. Moving on to these graphs. So here's my stock numbers. My stock intake duration ID, strato duration, crankcase compression. 143, 132, 61. Okay. As I was saying before, I'm not totally sure how to quantify the relationship between intake duration, strato duration, and crankcase compression in terms of diminishing return. I don't know where that line is. I don't know how to find it. I'm not a mathematician, but I've got this little unit here. I don't know how to explain the unit, but it's not a real thing. It's just meant to illustrate the point I'm trying to make. So to get these units, all I did was I took 143 divided by 132, multiplied by crankcase compression 61. That gave me 66.08. I did that for all these numbers, and I just changed, as you can see, I changed intake duration. So I went down 1 degree, saw what that did, and then I went up 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, and you can see on the side here, 66.08, 59 or 99, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Interestingly, up to 7, 8, 6, 5. So, yeah, so this is just trying to explain the relationship between fuel concentration, that is fuel to fresh air, so fresh charge to fresh air concentration, relative to crankcase compression. That's all these units are trying to illustrate from my head to the paper. So you can see there is a drop, a steady drop. As you gain intake duration, there actually is, if you account for the crankcase compression, there is a drop in these units. What these units are, who knows? But there's a little like, oh, it kind of goes down, 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 around, what is that? 151, 152. It kind of goes back up and then back down, down, down. So anyways, I'm not sure what that means. My worry with doing that was like, oh man, did I just have an idea and kind of screw the pooch there? Possibly, but I'll tell you how I'm going to fix it. Similar how to this guy, Kenny the Guitar Fanatic, did his 391. He did it extreme. He blocked those windows off entirely. I'm going to do it not so extreme. All I want to do is, you see how as this is moving up, this opens and these crack later. Without losing if I keep taking that, I'm going to keep losing crankcase compression and vacuum. So what I'm going to do instead is actually put just little dabs of JB Weld in the bottom of these Stratos. I could also do it in the piston, but I think I'm going to try it just in the Stratos. It'll take less material. And I've done that kind of thing before on intakes, and it works pretty well. Yeah, just going to shrink it by like 2 degrees. And so this is the same graph that I had before up here, my nonsensical illustration. But say I take, so if I hold intake duration steady, don't change that. Crankcase compression steady, don't change that. But I just change the strato duration. What happens to this magic number over here? So this one, what do we have here? This was my... these are my new stock or ported numbers. 152, 57, 132 is where it's at right now for Stratos. So as you can see now, as you lose strato duration, so add JB Weld, half degree, half degree, half degree, half degree, this actually goes up. There's a trend, there's an upward trend. Up arrow, upward trend. 65.63, 66.13, 66.64. So it's about a half a unit, magic unit, per half degree of strato duration that I take away from the bottom. Well, half a degree one way, a full degree of duration. So yeah, that's what I'm going to try, and it's proof's in the pudding. Old Kenny there got some good results with plugging up those Stratos, and his takeaway, the thing that he found out, I guess, by going extreme is you don't actually need the Stratos. You don't. They're purely an emissions thing. You do not need them. I like how this saw runs. I'm not mad at how this saw runs. There are other things I want to do to it. Timing, muffler. I already got a pitch conversion on it, quarter pitch. So yeah, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to plug that up, and I'm going to see how it runs. You know, I didn't take a before video, but I've run the saw enough, I think, to sort of see how it runs. And honestly, I'm happy with it. Guys like to smack talk these saws because they're like made of plastic, which I get. And when you buy one of these at the store out of the box, the carburetor is out of whack, man. It's like totally. It's never tuned. I bought one. Clearly, I've seen a lot of people buy them, and not a single one, mine included, had a tuned carburetor out of the box. I had to spend quite a fair bit of time, because at the time I didn't really know what I was doing. It was some years ago. A fair bit of time just like scratching my head and twisting knobs, and finally it started working, and then I learned how to tune it better, and now it's running great. But I get it if you're like you're just like a production dude, or like maybe I don't know, homeowner, you want a little saw and the friggin' thing's brand new and it won't run. I get why you'd be frustrated. They are good saws though. They will run well. And for someone like me that does it, you know, climbs trees and does the removals full time, pruning full time, it is worth it to me to take the time and do these kind of modifications. So let me know what you think there about this here. I don't know, these numbers, these relations. If I can figure out a better way to quantify that relationship, I would. But I'm no Gordon Jennings. I'm no, you know, mathematician, two-stroke mathematician. So I don't really know if I'll try that, or, you know, just go for the old school method of try something, test it. It sounds good, and run it. So yeah. Anyways, it's been fun. Let me know what you think.